Dai sai gera so denne nibu nyorai kyo kodo sho shujo. Great robe of liberation, virtuous field far beyond form and emptiness. Wearing the Tathagata's teaching, we vow to be with all things. Dai sai gera mugu muso denne ibu nyorai kyo kodo sho shujo. Please stand. The four vows. Shujo mu en seigan do. Beings are without number, I vow to liberate them all. Bon no ujin seigan gan. Afflictions are endless, I vow to dissolve them all. Om Ryo Seigan Gaku. Dharma gates are beyond measure, I vow to enter them all. Butsudo Mujo Seigan Jo. The way of the Buddha is unsurpassable, I vow to become it. The Heart Sutra. While practicing the deep practice of Prajnapada, Gita looked upon the five skandhas, and seeing they were empty of self-existence, said, "Here, Shariputra, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not separate from form. Form is not separate from emptiness. Whatever is form is emptiness. Whatever is emptiness is form. The same holds for sensation and perception, memory and consciousness. Here, Shariputra, all dharmas are defined by emptiness, not birth or destruction, purity or defilement, completeness or deficiency. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no sensation, no perception, no memory, and no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no shape, no sound, no smell, no taste, no feeling, and no thought, no element of perception from eye to conceptual consciousness, no causal link from ignorance to old age and death, and no end of causal link from ignorance to old age and death, no suffering, no source, no relief, no path, no knowledge, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, without attainment, Bodhisattvas take refuge in Prajnaparamita, live without walls of the mind, without walls of the mind, and thus without fear they see through delusions, and finally nirvana. All Buddhas past, present, and future also take refuge in Prajnaparamita, realize self mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, which heals all suffering and it's true, not false. Mantra in Prajnapara means us, spoken thus. Gate, Varagate, Varasangate, Bodhisattva. May the merit of this penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi ishi shizon samo moko the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
Please have a seat and face the wall. Hold the body very still. Have all of the senses open, in particular the eyes. Look directly ahead at the wall. And the attitude to take here is just observe. Nothing extra. Just observe. Hold everything still that you can hold still. And through contrast, see that which continues to move, which could be anything from the sounds outside the building to the sounds inside the room. Your thought patterns, moving across the expanse of your mind like clouds in the sky. Just observe. There's nothing really to be accomplished other than hold still and watch what continues to move without particularly adding on to anything or subtracting or judging. But if you do find yourself spontaneously adding on comments, considerations, exceptions, evaluations to what is spontaneously arising out of the past into this present moment. If you notice that, then just observe that. Don't add on to what you've just added on. Just observe. Just observe and train the mind to see what is true. Just observe.
Take a short break, then come back in for Sokuzan's Dharma talk.
I've seen this.
Scary problems. Oh. Sokuzan was like, I knew so. Everyone turned around. Everyone walked on and she did out. You wouldn't have known. It would just look funny. It was like, and he was like this. And he was like, it's all good.
Yeah. So she got your phone out
There's other chairs you want.
text me and tell me to call my mom for a little thing
Right now.
right now. Today's her
Do
birthday.
you know how to make a
I've
note?
been so busy all day that I forgot to call her until I was sitting here looking at the wall. I'm like, oh crap.
I'm gonna do it, Lisa.
Thank you.
You can say whatever you want.
Right now. Call your mom.
Yeah, this way when I get my phone out of there first, I'll see your text and I'll do it right away. Okay.
Call your mom. That's good. How was work for you?
Good, good. Thanks.
10 more days. Almost there.
Good work.
What's the weather like there, essentially?
You can sit on the couch.
Like in the summer? Yeah. Really?
Wow.
Fluctuates. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't is that like where the sun always is out? Yeah. How long is that for? Yeah.
Sunny all day?
Yeah.
Is there no skiers around there? There's skiers around there? Come on, let's go. Let's go. Look how much it
I just like noticed.
We're sitting in the room. He's like, I think you might paint that. It's like, no, that's a Picasso.
It's got movies
I've been for the full experience.
I saw movies on the wall.
I didn't even notice. Hey, how are you?
They haven't noticed it. They probably wouldn't take note.
Well, because you don't notice unless you look at it close enough.
I didn't know what to watch.
Those are interesting things.
So all the conversation is just live on YouTube.
He's an interesting guy.
YouTube?
He's my bottom.
Oh.
He's on my
That's just whatever.
He's on my bottom.
phone. Yeah, the house.
Enjoy it.
We made our own beds.
All I live in my house.
We go well so far.
It's really just around. It's a house.
We made our own bed.
I worked last night, which is unusual. I actually have to usually work on days. It's nice getting up this morning. And then, I did some yard work and stuff like that.
Nice.
Yeah, usually I'm out. Working.
Good day.
Excellent.
See.
That's why.
Is there any way you can tell who's on?
Is it on stuff?
Nope.
Does it tune?
Everybody wants to hear.
There's pictures on the altar.
Should I watch it?
Oh, yeah.
Cigarette?
Oh, yeah.
Cody.
Right now, like here.
Don't listen.
But I just this is meant to be. Shut it all off and disconnect it out. Michelle, take it back to him, but then, just pop it up. I this time, I just get it right here.
Yeah, I'm glad I got you. I was thinking about buying them. I'm not gonna buy them.
I don't think it's you.
They had honey problem.
Well, I would have tried
You had two of them.
Quarter. I had 3 wheels. Wait, once was just off the trucks.
Oh, yeah. Another couple drives to guys there. The company.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think about 3 or 4 Friday.
Good.
Yeah. Like every 5 years.
You're right on.
You want to be a good detail.
Yeah,
Just no way over.
my sister called smart working back.
It's
all right, she's not. Yeah, I think you guys are pretty.
You guys go on the river or you go on the lake?
She thinks they're cute. Yeah. I'll call my sister and say stuff. It's not very nice. I'll let my sister know that you like her. I don't think baggy jeans will come back. Remember how bad it was for a while? Yeah. The hammer jeans? The what?
Just gonna be out hangouts again.
It was making me laugh.
I can't hear you.
You guys were making me laugh. I know I was gonna laugh. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
Keep people trying
It's
to
my last time here. I don't want to leave the impression that I'm just like,
video conference Saturday, Sunday.
That's exactly right. That's why I got tattoos.
Right now?
When I heard that talking to them, they just, I keep missing calls.
You're also kind of getting everything wrapped out. So it was just great. We just went 2.5 hours just going over it. Bald eagle. Here.
I'm gonna find them some 2 national parks, state parks.
We have all of our technology figured out. Sort of things. We could do names. Sokuzan.
Unyo.
Christy,
Lisa,
JD.
Richard. Nick.
Anthony.
April, Tammy,
Jeff.
Alec. Daniel.
Ash,
Senshu.
Sheldon. Okay.
And who do we have on the line here? Sokuzan?
There are three.
Shane? Anna Maria? Okay. And Jim from Kentucky?
Could you ask if they can hear?
Can you hear? All right, we're checking our audio.
Not on the phone, but can they hear him talking on the computer? They say yes.
Can they hear on the computer?
Can you hear off from the computer? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there's quite a delay.
So if I raise my hand, can you see me raise my hand, Shane? We could spend the whole hour just doing this. So start. Venus, why don't you move out here where I can see you? Lost way back there behind those two giants. Right, sit right out here. Sit out there. Not bite. So I was going to talk this evening about being inspired by a text that I think Chizan reads quite often in the mornings, called the Sin Sin Ming, or the Faith Mind of Sokuzan, which comes from early days of Zen. He was the third Zen patriarch, lived in the 5th century and died right after he died in 606 or something like that. So this would be a good text for you all to read, Faith Mind, or the Sin Sin Ming, H-S-I-N, H-S-I-N-M-I-N-G, Sin Sin Ming, Heart Mind. And we don't really know for sure that it was Sokuzan who wrote that. There's disputes. Sometimes people spend their whole lives trying to decide who wrote what, and don't spend much time studying what they actually wrote, which might be a better approach rather than debating it. So it's a lot of things. There's just some great, as we say, one-liners in there. And one that I like, translation goes like, in this world of suchness, there is neither a self, or rather there is neither a self nor is there not a self. So you can't find any position. There's neither a solid separate identity, nor are we absent. Is it absent? Is it gone? The other way of saying that is it's there, but it's not real. It's kind of like a dream. It's there. You dream it. It's real while you're dreaming it, and then when you wake up, oh, it was a dream. I have a memory of something that at the time it occurred seemed pretty damned authentic. So the idea of suchness, difficult word, a difficult concept to comment on it, because as soon as we start to comment on it, we actually look away from the very thing we're commenting on. The closest thing you're going to have in your experience, more than likely, to suchness is the feeling of, I don't know, which looks like, of course, to our self-centered minds, looks like something you need to fill up with something you know. You need to know stuff. You need to know what to do. You need to have a plan, don't you? How are they working for you, those plans? Great. You have a big plan, and then the way I like to say, the way you know that something is a plan is you have to change it, or it doesn't work. That's another way of saying it. No matter what your plan is. But this doesn't mean you shouldn't plan. It just means that you should, when you plan something, you should be tentative about how that's going to work, and realize that it's probably going to flip over on its back at some point, and then you're going to have to deal with the underbelly of whatever that plan was. So this world of suchness neither has a self, neither is a self, nor is it not a self. The other way of saying that is not two. In the Zen tradition, we don't necessarily say, when I say we, I'm saying you're going to immediately go out and Google somebody who says just the opposite of what I said. Who's also a Zen monk, who is much older. He can't be a hell of a lot older. He's somewhat older, and is a real big know-it-all. What are they going to say? The opposite of what I just said. What did I just say?
Two.
Not two. They're going to say everything is one. And there are teachings even in Zen where they say it's oneness. Even the Sinsen Ming talks about oneness. But you have to reflect, or you have to think, you have to remember that this is something that's translated out of ancient Chinese writing. So we don't know what whoever looked at those Chinese glyphs and that what they symbolized, how they felt that would look best or work best in the context of what was being said and in our language. So, but not two. That actually is something you can actually apply. You can be in your life in your life situation, things are going okay, this is going pretty good, and then all of a sudden you run into something that is an obstruction. It could be in the form of an event or a people or a plan, and rather than getting embroiled in the turmoil that comes up around the failure that some sometimes feel, we immediately leap into some kind of analysis that usually leads to some kind of blaming. We want to know who's to blame. We want to know why it happened. You notice how many times you ask why? Why am I feeling this way? Why did this happen? Why? Circular. Why? Because. 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 If you're a child, that's fun. It's like a merry-go-round. But when you are an adult, you're grown up, then that's just kind of a waste of time. That's spinning in circles. You want to actually see what something fundamentally is. So if you say what, then you actually are confronted by what is actually there. It may feel less, you may be less sure of yourself. It may feel more empty of any kind of an outcome. It may feel more frustrating, but it's closer to the suchness that is being pointed at in the Buddha's teaching. Complete and partial and total and somewhat piecemeal emptiness. And the simple way of putting that is, what is it empty of? It's empty of your ideas about it. That's a really good way that most people can begin to understand emptiness. It's probably more profound than that. One of the ways you can experience this, and I use this example over and over again, I probably should get it on. If you think of one, let me know. But somebody's walking towards you that you know, or that you've talked with, that you had lunch with yesterday, something happened, everything was going really well, and they have a really kind of a mean or sad or grouchy or some kind of look on their face that is negative. And instead of being willing to not know what the situation was, our mind will jump into speculation about it, trying to find out, is it something I said? What happened? Did their dog pass away? All of the things we lay on top of it. And what you find out is that situation, that person, what you see there is empty of what you think about it. To be able to be in your life and not speculate on anything, but to see clearly that which arises as it is, as it was written down there, as it is. To do that is to begin to slowly train yourselves over time, especially if you're doing sitting meditation, facing a wall. That's how you train yourself to do that. It's pretty hard to do meditation in action without doing meditation with no action. You're going to do meditation out in the woods, looking at birds, searching for beautiful leaves. You might do well to spend some time doing some, what I call, and some other people call voluntary dissatisfaction. So volunteering to instead of trying to figure out a way to get out of your negativity, to actually volunteer to go down and sit, hold very still and see what continues to move, because usually it's your negativity. It's the stuff that as long as the body's in motion, have you noticed that? As long as you can adjust slightly, you can kind of stay out of your thought patterns. In other words, you can ignore the ones that are difficult. But if you hold very still, you're kind of in for it, because anything that you're trying to get away from or push down or ignore starts to bubble up. The downside is it's bubbling up and it doesn't feel good. The upside is you're actually looking at what you need to look at in order to transcend this threefold world. In order to see beyond, to transcend, to work in a positive way with not only suffering that here is your own mind, but the suffering you stumble into or run into in the news, on the internet, on television, your next door neighbors, your parents, your children, all of the people that we deal with all day long. How are you going to work with that? If you're stuffing your own feelings and emotions, pretty difficult to work with other people's negativity in a way that is fundamentally helpful to them, if in fact that's something you would like to do. Because if you try to help people based on your preconceptions, your ideas about what they need and what they don't need, then you are meddling and you're actually making a nuisance of yourself. You may not feel that way. You may feel like kind of proud of yourself, especially if somebody else on the same track is giving you awards and stamps of approval on your forehead. So it needs to be seen. You actually need to see this yourself. If you see it yourself, you won't need to check in with anybody. As my teacher, Kobanchino Roshi, once said, get your own authority. How do you get your own authority? You just kind of pretend you know everything, or just say, I'm not going to do what anybody tells me to do, which is kind of the 8-year-old version. Get your own authority. Or can you sit down and with your mind, with your awareness, with your ability to observe what is actually the truth for yourself, see that there is no such thing as an authority. It just looks like there is. Looks like there is. Looks intensely like somebody knows what's going on here. And I just need to either talk to them, or I need to be them, or I need to. There isn't any central bureaucracy of anything in the reality that is sometimes described as no separation. The wonderful thing about this, well, let's start with the difficult thing first. The difficult thing about this is you lose. You lose. It's that's why Buddhism is sometimes called pessimistic, very pessimistic. World is suffering. It's not always suffering. Yes, it is. It's just that you can block part of it out. You could say, well, sometimes I feel really good. Yeah, but how about your next door neighbor? Can you actually feel good and enjoy yourself when they're on their deathbed? Can you actually enjoy yourself at the beach and ignore the whole world that is ripping itself apart, especially in certain areas of the world? Or you like to just watch the news for an hour. Watch Fox News. So the kind of suffering that we see, that we begin to see when we are not too preoccupied with our own pleasure system, we begin to see that, yes, everything really is pretty stressed out in lots of different places. The three types of suffering are the pain of pain, like being ill, having stomachache, having bone cancer. The pain of alternation, which is the one where things are running fine, they're in really good shape, and all you can do is think about tomorrow when everything is completely coming apart, or when you have to go back to your crummy job. And then the pain of the composite, which is what one begins to see when the self-centeredness, the grasping at some kind of solid being here, starts to come apart and crumble. It doesn't go away, it's still there. Sometimes it's described as being transparent. You start to see that when you try to find something here, all you see is a wall behind you. Then you're able to really see what is happening. And you also see that since there's nothing here for you to attach to and be wonderfully in love with, sometimes called narcissism, self-centeredness, egotism, any other kind of word might apply. So there's still a sense of some kind of identity happening, but it doesn't seem to reside here. And then it takes a while, but then you begin to see that it doesn't reside out there either. And that's when we come back to there's neither a self nor is there not a self. Sometimes this is called the middle way. It's not too tight, not too loose. Lots of other lines out of Sokuzan's text, faith in the heart mind. Do you recall any? Remember?
What is the disease of the mind that it refers to?
Pardon me?
Repeat.
What is it?
Conflict between good and evil, I think, something like that, to that effect.
Alrighty, what it is. It's just basically picking and choosing. If you pick and choose, if you're grasping and rejecting, even though that grasping and rejecting of things looks validated by the causes and conditions that are arising around you, even though it looks, well, yeah, you're going to reject this because it's obviously not going to work, and you're going to accept this because obviously these guys are making money and these guys aren't. So why would you invest in this when this is doing so well? So we're not saying that there isn't some relative backup for anything that we choose, either selecting this and rejecting that, or rejecting that and selecting this. It's just that in the big picture, that's just called a dance. It goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Go ahead. You have something you want to read? Don't get too wordy. I want to talk.
There's a lot in here I could.
Well, just read one. Just saying read one. And I'll comment on it or something.
Can I say one before you do
Go
it?
ahead.
Because it's on the same. The way is not difficult, save that it avoids picking and choosing. And then it goes into
That's the first.
disease of the mind. But
That's the first line. Yeah, go ahead.
the way is not difficult, except that it avoids picking and choosing. Isn't that basically coming to the same place? Don't do anything unless you have to.
Yes.
Yeah. That's all I want to say. Go ahead.
Well, just pick one. You don't have to look for the very best one.
There's one that I really like, but I can't find
But don't pick and choose.
it. What, do I have the disease of mind right now?
Just read one.
When the fundamental nature of things is not recognized, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail.
Yeah. So what is that saying? It's saying that when the fundamental nature of things is not recognized, when you don't recognize that what you're looking at is like a mirror, you're actually looking at yourself. It's not the limited kind of self that we conventionally grasp at and reject in other places. It's just that you're not fundamentally separate from anything. The separation is there. There is a separation. I'm over here and I'm good looking and you guys aren't. Or vice versa. That kind of picking and choosing is going to go on no matter what. We're always going to have kind of ideas and opinions. It's when they start to get ramped up and we start to go to war. The next thing we're invading other countries and sending drone planes. So a little bit is not a problem. But when the fundamental nature is seen, which is no self, no other, when we actually see fundamental reality, when you actually see it yourself, you're no longer at odds with anything, anywhere. Anything that occurs is neither what? Accepted, rejected, or ignored. Those are the three poisons. If you're doing any one of those three, you are fighting with your world and with reality. And then you might say, well, does that mean if a bear chases me, I'm just supposed to let it eat me? No. Run up the tree. Just don't take your eyes off the bear. It might be right behind you. Those are the three: passion, aggression, and ignorance. Pushing on it, aggression; pulling on it, or changing it around, or embracing it, or fixating on it, passion. And then the one that's the most difficult, just because its very nature is to like voluntary blindness. We distract ourselves. We either literally look away, turn around and walk away, or we might still be looking at the situation, but we're distracting ourselves. You can see this in someone's eyes when you're talking to them. If they're listening to you, if they have any other motivation, the other motivation is there. But if they're looking at you and they're listening, they'll just be there. But if you're talking, you can almost see it. It's almost like a glassy look comes in someone's eyes when they go into their own world. They might not do this. It's not all that dramatic. The next time you're in a conversation with somebody, especially somebody you might have some difficulty with, stay in your senses. If you stay in your if you stay in your senses, then the sixth sense, or the consciousness that's always looking for advantage and fear of disadvantage, that will harmonize more with the environment, because you're here, you feel gravity, you feel your arms, you feel your clothing, you hear the sounds in the street. Don't ignore anything. You hear this: include everything. Anytime you exclude, we're looking for the path to war. Yes, sir.
In there somewhere, there's a place where it kind of suggests using the phrase "not to" as sort of a
mantra,
like a mantra. Yeah, and I didn't want to find it, but my question is, you can do that without really. I mean, if you've seen it, that's one thing, because then you're just remembering something you've already seen. But if you don't have that, then rather than just to say "not to" as a matter of faith, because Sokuzan or somebody said, that's the way it is. There's the kind of the Madhyamaka emptiness reasoning of dependent origination that you can do to kind of arrive at a rational understanding of why there's not to? Are there other things that you can do so that you're not just like believing in not to?
Well, I don't think I think what's being suggested in there by saying not to is when you get in a pickle, in a predicament where you're at war with yourself or with someone else and you're feeling stressed, you're feeling like you're going to lose, you're feeling like you're at a disadvantage, you feel like the cards are stacked against you, whatever, you can just remind yourself, and I don't mean it like a mantra, but you can just remind yourself, you can say that it looks like two things are happening, but they're actually not. I've been told this doesn't work unless you're a meditator. And when I say that, as soon as I say that, I think, well, how do I know? Maybe it will work. But it seems like something you remind yourself, like we have several reminders. There's another one that I like that's things that are going haywire, and you put your palms together and you say, thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever, even though at the same time you have a whole bunch of complaints. But you're trying to go softly and gently against the constant objection that we have, the knee-jerk reaction to just dislike and hate and be upset. Thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever. At the same time, you have complaints, but if you do that, something about the quality of the mind that splits off. It just gives you a kind of a bigger picture. You have a feeling of there's a bigger picture going on there. So I think when you use that kind of a thing, that kind of a slogan, it's just like drive all blames into one, or all dharmas meet at one point. Or of the two, keep the principal witness. They're slogans. That particular one is of the two, keep the principal witness, which comes out of Atisha's 7 points of mind training in the 13th century, 12th century. And that just means that don't trust anybody but yourself. Of the two, you and everybody else, keep the principal witness. Only you really your awareness, consciousness has been here from the time you were born, and you really need to trust yourself. And the thing I like to add to that is that does not mean believe your thought patterns. That is not trust. And in fact, that is a fearful approach, just to think that everything you think is somehow accurate or correct. The way I like to say it sounds a little bit more esoteric or fancy, but you should trust the space in which the thoughts occur. The space will never lie. Only thoughts lie. And that's the very nature of thoughts, is they're what? Untrue. They're untrue. There's a relative truth to them, but a relative truth will not help you through this world. When I say through this world, I'm saying the life and death aspect of the world. You may say to yourself, well, I'm here, I'm young, I'm going to live a long time. Well, you don't know. It's like this, what is this slogan or the saying there's a drawing somewhere that shows the Grim Reaper with a sickle and a hood and, skeleton looking out, and the slogan underneath it is, I am coming. I think that's pretty funny.
In the Sin Ming,
Yes.
it references the 10,000 things.
Yes.
What are the 10,000 things?
So here you are here, or here you are there, and you're here, I'm here, and everything else is the 10,000 things. So everywhere you look, there's just all kinds of little bits and pieces of everything. They just call it 10,000 because everybody has about 10,000 things that they actually point to, look at, value, devalue, concepts and ideas, and actual objects of mind, physical objects. There's 10,000 of them. It's just a way of referring to the world of multiplicity and plurality that is impossible to have any say-so about. You can take this and move it there and hope that it causes this, but then you haven't considered that this was coming down the track a few moments ago and it's going to run into that. It's like being a really good driver. There's a little bit of protection in that. Only if you had to drive with just other really good drivers. Then it works pretty good. But every time you go out on the road, you don't know not only who's going to be not a very good driver, but who is going to have heart failure and come across the center lane. So we do not know. So that's the 10,000 things. Let's talk about something more cheerful. Questions? You?
You said include, and if not, then you're probably at war.
If you're excluding things, it might be working for a while, but some kind of warfare is going to take place to try to exclude. The way anytime you exclude, you create, you're just adding to the separation of things that eventually will come back around and create a warlike situation or tension, if nothing else. More.
So in the middle of a difficult situation that may be laden with anger, jealousy, or other negativity, can we intercede and turn to including? Is it possible to do that in the heat of the moment?
Sure.
How?
Sit a lot. So that there's a stronger possibility, since you practice just looking at what moves, without pushing it down, without fluffing it up, and without looking away from it. You get better, you could say. It's not all that comfortable, but you get better and better at seeing what is actually true, what is actually has some kind of validity to it in terms of cause and effect. By not accepting, rejecting. Like it says in the first line there. Picking and choosing, trying to get an advantage for our self-centeredness. It's not that works a little bit, but it won't cover this entire picture we call living the human life.
So this seems to be a path where we talk about no progress.
Yes.
But in a situation like that, where we're embroiled in negative feelings, will sitting show us progress?
What do you mean by progress?
Getting better, not flaring up when something doesn't go my way.
So the beginning, there's different stages in the path, and people work with their neurosis or their discontent in different ways. And some people will. You may have a feeling of depending on your own karma. Use the fancy word. You may have the tendency to be less likely to go to war. A general softening of how you relate to things. More of an attitude of waiting to see what's going to happen with something before you jump the gun and get in there because you're afraid you might lose control. This is called patience. It doesn't feel like it when you're doing it. It can feel like, might feel a little antsy about it, but you don't move anyway. You just wait. And so by practicing waiting on a cushion, it's just like waiting for a bus that never comes. You just wait, and that you find that same kind of awareness, that same kind of attitude, begins to come up through the floorboards in your life, and you find that you might even see some contrast there. You're just less likely to go to war with something or get upset about something you might have gotten upset about 3 months ago or something. But then if you do any identity work with that, like if you grasp onto that as, I think I'm getting better, well, then you're just asking for it, because you're going to get broadsided by something, more than likely. So there is some progress. There is a feeling, but we can't do too much with it other than have it be an encouragement to keep going. So the best thing that my teacher, and I say this to other students of mine all the time, the best teacher is the thing that my Trungpa Rinpoche ever said to me is, you can do it. You can do it. And I say it to everybody all the time, because I know how important that, because you're in the middle of something, you don't feel like you can do it. You feel like that you're not doing it. You're not going to be able to understand this, because it's just you've looked into it, you've been looking into it, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. It just looks impossible. It looks impossible The downside of it looking impossible is it looks impossible. But the upside of it is you're actually looking at the conundrum that is going to break at some point. It's going to completely fall through, and the threefold world, past, present, and future, collapse. It's in Zen. It's called sometimes called stepping off the 100-foot pole. The 100-foot pole is all the relative stuff that you do to try to get to the top of the pole. Well, when you get to the top of the pole, there's nowhere to go. You've understood, you've seen, you've practiced, you've done this. Now there's only one place to go, and that's straight out off the end of the pole into space. And as has been said by many other teachers in different ways, the bad thing is you're falling through space. The good thing is you never hit bottom. Free fall indefinitely. Kind of like having a parachute to go sideways. There's a thing. Yes.
Okay. So you say when we meditate, excuse me, not to join in or like add to it. Subtraction.
I do say that.
So I'm just using this as like a reference, like to understand it better.
Of course.
Like what happens, like say you think of something funny and your body automatically laughs. Are you adding to it? Are you surrendering your awareness? Because like you lost control. I just want to understand better.
So when I say don't add, I know you can't stop adding. If I can't stop adding, you probably can't either. So I know you can't. You can't stop judging. You can't stop adding, you can't stop doing any of that. But what that does is that gets your awareness to, because you're trying to stop adding, you're trying to see, it gets you to see the way in which you keep adding to everything. And I don't necessarily want to comment on thinking something's funny. If it's funny, laugh. It isn't like, I mean, have you noticed that if something is really funny, you don't sit back and say, I think it's one of those funny times where I laugh. I don't know, maybe I should check with Google Hangouts or something.
You have another one-liner, don't add unless you have to.
That would probably work. So the idea is that you see it, you see yourself adding on to that, and by bringing the awareness to that, you notice, and then over time you begin to see how much you're judging everything that comes up. If something happens, you add to it. Something else happens, you add to that. Something else happens, you subtract, or you judge it, or you value something, you devalue something else. Your awareness begins to start to look at not so much the content itself, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, which is what ego does, but you actually look at whether you are adding on an opinion of it's a good thing or a bad thing. So you've kind of stopped necessarily thinking that things are innately good or innately bad. And over time, interestingly enough, the adding does start to fall away, but it doesn't fall away by pushing it down or stopping, because that's just more adding.
Getting back to what you were talking about before, part of what you were talking about before. Sometimes when I am sitting with something, going into it, it just becomes like that's all there is. There's no end to it. Then I wonder if maybe I'm going too far into it. I mean, can you go too far with that to where?
Probably not, but I can see where that can come up. One of the things that'll cure you of that, when I say cure you, probably nothing's going to cure you. I'm sorry to say, but it would be to go into a retreat where you're doing nothing but doing sitting meditation day in and day out for several weeks, where you're actually you're watching yourself go too far into it over and over and over and over again, and then you begin to realize that your discursive thought around that is just one more of the shenanigans of ego, of trying to get you to stop looking. Ego gets very self-conscious. The self-centeredness is incredibly good at hiding out, and not being seen through for what it is, a hall of mirrors. There's no solid being. If you realize that, then then you can just be who you are. Whatever this lifetime has occurred for you, you can be who you are. When I say be who you are, that does not necessarily mean it validates some kind of negative stuff that's coming up. I don't think you can sit too much. Especially if you have somebody who's sat a lot, who's probably sat too much to check in with. Say, well, am I sitting too much? Well, how much are you sitting? 2 hours a day. Nope. Crank it up. Yes, Ash.
Can you talk about one more line?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that would be fine. What is it?
To return to the root is to find the essence, but to pursue appearances or enlightenment is to miss the source.
Yeah. So to pursue anything, enlightenment or anything else, is you're pursuing concepts. And so when you do that, you are embroiled in the judges, the opinions and the ideas and everything about the concept of enlightenment or anything else, or appearances. You get embroiled in appearances, and not so much the appearance, it's the lamination or the opinion, the idea, the judgment, the description, the evaluation, and all the recipes and menus and everything that overlay everything that appears. It's called in the Yogacara tradition, it's called the three modes. It's the mode called parikalpita, or the imaginary nature, or the imputed nature. You're actually imputing, you're not actually looking at what's in front of you. You're looking at it and you immediately go into some kind of imputation about what it is, what it's, and so on. So if you're doing that, you're doing the same thing with enlightenment and with every other appearance. So what's being said there is, what was the first line?
To return to the root is to find the essence.
Yeah, so how do you return to the root? You return to the root by sitting down and backing up 1/4 of an inch into the perceiver, him or herself. Go very deeply into that which perceives. And then the perception starts to become actual perception. Then you actually see what's there. If you see what's there, you'll see that you're not separate from that. And warfare will be over. We have just a few minutes left. Any questions on the phone?
I have a question.
Okay,
Or two, maybe.
go ahead, Shane.
In realization, do we still make interpretations, but see what they really are?
Is that a true or false, or multiple choice, or what are you giving me?
In realization, do we still make interpretations?
Yes.
Okay. Second question. So if I have a friend or somebody I care about, or somebody I don't even know, and I can tell they're upset,
Yes.
do I not meddle?
Well, less is better, because when you're holding back a little bit and waiting to see what the fundamental situation is about, rather than jumping in and, like you say, using the word that I often use, meddling with it, based on your presumptions, your preconceptions about what's good for this person, what would help this person. It seems to be better to wait. It's more respectful of not only, it's more respectful of what's happening with that person to wait and allow them to go through whatever they need to go through, rather than interfere with it based on your own discomfort. When we're around somebody who's really having difficulty, quite often it's our own discomfort that we're trying to assuage, rather than actually fundamentally being at the service of the person in a fundamental way from the root. If you're there at the root, they will be too. And they might not even know it. They might not even recognize the kind of help they need unless you're there and you're present and you're not meddling. And then they may kind of have an expectation that you're going to jump in and you're going to help them, or you're going to push this, or well, maybe I should do this, maybe you should do that, maybe you should do this. And when you don't do it, we're not separate. And so if you take your seat and trust yourself and trust gravity, then the other person trusts it too. You ever notice how body language is quite often someone will mirror your body language? You know, if you look like a squirrel, they will too. It's supposed to be funny. So, not meddling or not interfering based on preconceptions is the idea. Don't go in unless you absolutely have to change something or save somebody. Further question, Shane?
I brought a friend with me today named Stu. He wants you to talk about what do you mean by, what is the space, and what do you mean by trust the space?
I'm saying that you trust the space in which things occur. By doing that, what is meant is you won't know. Trust the not knowing. Trust the not knowing in the sense that you see the thoughts arising, you see the opinions, you see the various kinds of chatter that's going on in your mind, but look at the space in which it arises. If you see the space in which it arises, then what you need to do will also rise there. It won't necessarily be a thought about I need to do this or I need to do that. And I would like to follow up on that and say, I think it's pretty difficult for a person, for most people, maybe not everyone, for most people to do this without having a really strong practice of meditation where they look at space several times a day, the space of their mind, and look at the thoughts arise. You have to look at the thoughts arise in the mind a long time before you begin to see that the mind is like a blue sky. Nothing can there's not a black enough cloud to make a mark in a blue sky. It comes and goes. Kozan, are you there?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
She's on.
Okay, that's it from Thankful Mindy.
Okay. See you later, Shane. Thanks to your friend.
She can't do both. She's on the phone on this.
Oh, okay. So any other questions here before we close?
But I think James have a question.
Jim, you have a question?
No, I don't have any tonight, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Some question here.
Is mirroring someone's body language, is that more due to an actual interpretation, like the mind's own interpretation of someone else mirroring
No.
your body language? Or
Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying we should mirror anybody. I'm not saying I should look at you and mirror. I'm just saying watch body language. When I say mirror, I'm not saying mirror like this looks like that.
well, I'm asking, is it more due to? Never mind.
Well, let me help you here. I mean, seriously, it's a good question. I'm saying that the way in which that functions is it drops you into another strata of communication that is not conceptual. It's not. I mean, maybe if I make different kinds of gestures, you may convert that into concepts right away and take some kind of meaning from it that is positive, negative, or neutral. But just general body language itself tells you so much about what's happening with a person. And it doesn't necessarily arise in concepts like, well, they're not paying attention, or they're really nice, or they're really mean, or they're really bored, or they're really. It doesn't necessarily. It doesn't go into that. It stays in its own environment, stays in its own village. doesn't leave town. And it's a powerful way of understanding that begins to resonate, and you realize there's all kinds of layers. There's like all of the senses have their own layer. Sound, the tone of someone's voice, the way a person talks. If you do this enough, if you sit enough, you will eventually hear your own voice all the time, and it won't sound like you. You won't know who it is, and you won't mind. You won't have a problem with anything you say. You rarely will say, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Now, you might say something and realize that you maybe hurt someone's feelings or offended them, and you might follow up with I didn't mean to offend you. With a sincere apology, one time. You do it any more than that, that's suspect. Thank you for that. That's good. Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, so can I have some technical help here? Like people who know how machinery works.
Yep.
And I guess we'll dedicate the merit then. Do we want to close or do the dedication with?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay.
We do have a donation box at the back of the room, so any help you can give us is always greatly appreciated. Either now or in the future date. Please stand. May the merit of this penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shifu shi son bu sa moko sa moko cha ho ni. The 10 directions of 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Sokuzan.
You're welcome. Thank you.